The metronome in CLOCKstep is for sending MIDI note data to an external synth, sampler, or drum machine to generate an audible click track. This demonstration uses the Roland TM2 with a snare cross-stick sample loaded. For this demo, I've made 10 metronome patterns and stored them into 10 different presets. Let's audition each first, and then later I'll discuss how to set up the metronome. The base configuration of the metronome is accessed through the Settings menu. The metronome can be disabled or enabled globally. Set the MIDI channel to the device that will receive the metronome data. There are 3 types of notes that make up a metronome pattern, and you can adjust each of their MIDI note values and velocities. The beat note is the main metronome pulse. The velocity, or volume, is normally the lowest of all of them. If the beat note is the main pulse and, for example, is set to something like an 1/8 note, then the accented note would be more typically a 1/4 note or a longer interval, and also have a higher velocity. The relationship between the beat and the accented note velocities gives the click a more dynamic feel. The first beat note is the sound that will play only on the first note of each bar. It should be the loudest velocity. With the setup saved, you should now be able to hear sound coming from your audio source whenever the clock's running. Now let's look at the options within a preset for creating the metronome pattern. Use metronome governs when the metronome will play and when it won't. The default is always. If the clock is running or the transport is started, then the metronome is also playing. Setting it to never will disable the metronome for this preset only. Clock only means when the clock is running but the transport is stopped, then you'll hear the metronome. When the transport starts, the metronome stops. Cue in only means that the metronome will only play during the cue in phase. Metronome beat is where you'll set the main pattern for the rhythm. It'll play the MIDI note that you set for beat note in the main settings. I'll now show all the rhythmic intervals available. They're arranged in ascending order by interval length. Quarter shuffle is a quarter triplet that skips over every other note. Eighth shuffle is an 1/8 triplet that skips over every other note. 1/8 skipping plays only the upbeat 1/8 notes. Sixteenth Gallop eliminates the note that follows the quarter note in a straight 16th note pattern. 16th skipping plays every other 16th note. It eliminates all quarter and 1/8 notes from the pattern. Metronome accent is where you'll set the accent pattern. It plays the MIDI note that you set for accent note in the main settings. It has all the same values as the beat note patterns that you just saw. Whenever the patterns for beat note and accent note intersect, the accent note plays instead of the beat note. And metronome first beat sets whether you want a special note on the first beat of every bar. That's the note that you set as the first beat note back in the main settings. The time signature can also have an effect on the metronome pattern. For example, this dotted metronome pattern in 7/4 will continue with the dotted note interval into the start of the next bar. And here's what 5/4 is like. A shorter time signature like 5/8 will interrupt the dotted pattern prematurely. And lastly, it deserves mentioning that you're able to change the metronome pattern through the MIDI in interface in real time.